Building a portfolio with Fidelity Basket Portfolios is kind of like making a sandwich. It's as simple as picking your stocks and ETFs, sort of like your meats and other toppings, and managing it as one big, juicy investment. Now that's pretty good. Learn more at fidelity.com/baskets. Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC. Member NYSE SIPC.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Business. How can you free up your team from time-consuming office tasks? Amazon Business empowers leaders to not only streamline purchasing, but better support their teams so they can focus on strategy and growth. Free up your teams and focus on your future. Learn more about the technology, insights, and support available at amazonbusiness.com.
Ah, Smart Water, now in a sleek can.
This feels cool, literally.
Perfect for social gatherings and on the go.
Should I start wearing turtlenecks?
One sip at a time, friend. Smart Water cans, for those with a taste for taste. Get yours today.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Just a reminder that Price of Football Club members now get each episode as soon as it's ready, rather than having to wait until first thing Tuesday for our weekly questions episode or first thing Thursday for our weekly news episode. So if you join the Price of Football Club, you'll get each episode the day before everyone else. Just go to priceoffootball.com to join the club now. Although, Kieran, it gets a bit complicated because for logistical reasons, we're recording Thursday's news pod on Tuesday evening. Cut to, almost inevitably, the Man City case coming to a conclusion on Wednesday, and us having to rush back from whatever our logistical reasons are. I forget now to record. But yes, if club members can listen to this, if they want, a full 48 hours before anything has actually happened that we're talking about.
Yes. We have entered a twilight zone in terms of time management.
Kieran, it's new. I would normally have filled you in with details of some of the shenanigans at Crystal Palace's trophy celebrations on yesterday, Monday, but in the circumstances, I don't think it's appropriate to talk about funny things that happened on a trophy celebration. I just think we both join in sending our thoughts to all those concerned in your native city. There's a massive mutual respect, loving between Palace fans and Liverpool fans at the moment. So when that news started coming through in the pub yesterday, it was a real quietener. So we just send our best to everyone, Kieran. There's a massive love in between every club at this time of the season, pretty much. We've all resolved our differences and we're all thinking about the people involved. I'm sure I know how much Liverpool means to you, Kieran, and I know you're recording not far from where those events took place, so it's particularly poignant.
Yes, and also I think we tend to get distracted by the negative things, but the kindness of strangers is very evident. I live in a block of flats here, and I wasn't up. I wasn't up in Liverpool the night when it happened, which was Monday. But people were just doing good citizen things, giving cups of tea. The people were visibly shaken. Some people, the trains had stopped for a while. So some people were offering people a bed for the night. What actually this shows is that there is far many good people around than bad. And at times like this, we do rally around and you send your love and best wishes to everybody who has been hurt by what's happened here and who are in hospital, and just wish them a speedy recovery.
Yeah. As it happens, Kieran, it is news day, but there's not that much news to report. All the news stories we have, I think there's a spreadsheet, a bingo card of Price of Football favourites coming up.
Yes.
Starting with FIFA, Kieran. I'll let you describe this story because it has the word controversial in it and the word pricing.
Yes, I mean, I think I've hinted before that my intention was to attend the World Cup in 2026, Canada, Mexico, and the United States. And I describe myself as a seasoned World Cup attendee. I've been wondering why we've not seen anything appear on the FIFA website in terms of tickets, because you need to start planning things. You find out what's available and so on. And lo and behold, it now appears to be the case that our very good friends at FIFA, they've decided to go the full burnage and go along the Liam and Noel route of dynamic pricing. Now, for people who are unfamiliar with dynamic pricing, it effectively means that it goes to the highest bidder. So there is no doubt that the World Cup in 2026 will be extremely popular. The chances are that it will be oversubscribed in terms of demand for tickets. So how do you deal with that? Well, historically, FIFA have done that by putting everybody into a ballot. And there's a degree of democracy about that. And sometimes you get more tickets than you hoped for. Sometimes you get less. Sometimes you get the right number. And I've experienced all of those in the past. But what it would now appear is that certain matches, they will effectively try to up the price that they can extract from fans in order to make more money for FIFA. Let's be perfectly blunt. This is the driving force. It's not some form of democratization of ticket sales. And there is this huge sense of disappointment. I remember being at the World Cup in 2010 in South Africa, and for all the criticism leveled at FIFA, they were letting local kids in for effectively nothing or next to nothing for some of the less popular matches. And it was great. And whilst one's enthusiasm for vuvuzelas can diminish exponentially within the first 5 minutes, I still remind myself, this is real. This is fantastic stuff. And yes, FIFA will say, well, it's going to cost you a fortune to get to America. It's going to cost you a fortune to get accommodation and transport and all these costs. And therefore, the cost of your ticket isn't a significant issue. My major concern, however, is that if this is deemed to be a success for FIFA, this is going to open the floodgates in terms of ticketing pricing going forwards. Now, we already have a form of dynamic ticket pricing, and this certainly affects my club. I suspect it affects yours as well, Kevin, in the sense that there are grade A matches, grade B, grade C, and so on. And you pay for the privilege of seeing Manchester United and Liverpool and Manchester City and so on. Whereas, no disrespect to Wolves or Leicester, it's more difficult to shift tickets. I would anticipate that if this works for FIFA, UEFA will certainly follow suit, and then it will start to become the norm in terms of the way that clubs structure their ticketing strategy. We already are aware that many clubs are trying to reduce the number of season tickets available in order to maximise, horrible word this, the yield per fan in terms of attending matches. And football's going to follow what we've seen in music and other live events. It's hugely disappointing. And I think it's evidence of the complete hypocrisy of what we saw during COVID, where the constant narrative is football is nothing without fans. And I think of all of those fans who gave refunds to the club. When they couldn't attend, and the clubs wrote to you and said, "Look, we have to give you your season ticket money back. However, if you want to donate the money you've already paid, we would be extremely grateful." And I did that. And I know other people have done that, especially at the lower league level, where matchday income is so much more critical. You now feel that you've been a bit of a fool and that you've been manipulated.
I don't know if it's still the case, Kieran, but certainly in recent seasons, clubs would always say it was down to the police whether a game was grade A or grade B in terms of security. Like Liverpool will bring a lot more fans, possibly touts. Man City, a lot more fans. So therefore the security costs will be higher and therefore the ticket prices will be higher. I don't think they even bother to use that excuse now. They just say, well, you're going to pay more for seeing Liverpool play. In terms of the World Cup, though, Kieran, 2 questions here. And then I want to mention something about travel to tournaments. When the FIFA tickets go on sale for the World Cup, firstly, are they sold top down? So do they sell the biggest corporate packages first and then work their way down to the cheapest tickets if they're still available? And secondly, it's only just occurred to me recently that surely the ticket prices for games in Mexico will be smaller, won't they, than for games in LA or New York? you'd think?
Well, let's look at those in turn. I think FIFA have started to sell the hospitality packages independently of the tickets which are available to the fans who will be in. I won't describe them as cheap seats because they won't be cheap.
Right, yes, of course.
But
yeah.
again, all we can do is look at things from a historical perspective. What FIFA tends to do is to say that there are 4 prices per match. So just like if you went to a match at Wembley, which you I believe you may have done on a few occasions in recent weeks, you know that if you want a ticket at the halfway line, those are the price list tickets. Then they fan out.
Sure.
So FIFA have historically done that, and there's been a certain number of tickets allocated for the 2 teams, and then the rest have gone to neutrals. So that has always been the case. How they're going to apply this dynamic pricing, we don't know. It could be that there'll be some form of algorithm that if they see a surge in so we say you're applying for a ticket which will be no more than $250, and you find out in due course as to exactly how it works. In terms of prices for Mexico, I'm not so certain, because one would anticipate that as a host country, Mexico will be playing all of its games there. It's
of course.
It's a fanatical country in terms of football support, so they're bound to be a sellout. If they are matches involving Mexico's rivals, in the group stage, for example, I would imagine there'll be significant interest there as well. So I don't see FIFA discriminating on a geographical basis. Myself and the Baroness were actually thinking of going to Mexico, partly due to the fact that we've been offered to stay with one of my former students whose family is the largest exporter of octopus in Mexico.
Oh, wow. Oh.
And I'm a big octopus fan. So we were thinking of going there. And I think there could be some fans of other countries that might decide to go to Canada or Mexico just because it's an alternative venue. It's an alternative culture to the United States, and they want to see it through a footballing lens.
Well, there are a lot of people who don't want to travel to the United States full stop at the moment, Kieran. I don't let Ali hear you say that about octopus. She will try it. She won't eat octopus. No, I don't know whether it's some kind of squiddly diddly hangover. Obviously, the world's greatest drummer, what with him having all those legs, etc. But she read somewhere that octopus or octopi were the most intelligent creatures, and pigs, cows, she doesn't bother her a bit.
Right.
Octopus, she won't. So every now and again, we'll be in a Spanish and she'll go, I have to say to the waiter, if you've got octopus on the specials, mate, don't mention them. In my innocence, Kieran, talking about dynamic pricing, I didn't realise until a Spurs fan told me last week that as soon as the Europa League final was decided between United, obviously, and Spurs, that ticket prices from Manchester Airport and Stansted to Bilbao in the 2 days before the final went through the roof, because they just, EasyJet and Ryanair, whoever, just go, well, there's going to be thousands of Spurs Man United fans who want to fly to Bilbao. We'll charge them as much as we possibly can. I didn't know that was happening.
Yeah, that was happening. The same was happening in terms of hotels. I've experienced it myself, as you know. I've recently got an apartment in Liverpool, but prior to that, if Liverpool were at home, or if it was in Manchester and Manchester United were at home, the prices of hotels would go through a significant increase, even for the lowest grade of hotel. And I've stayed at the Adelphi in Liverpool, which is, I think I deserve some form of reward for.
It's hard to. Apparently, it's once the most luxurious hotel in the area. But I'd be doing a disservice to Wetherspoons if I described the Adelphi as a Wetherspoons with beds. But that's about the closest you can. But there are times when you go into a Wetherspoons, you think, well, this carpet's lovely compared to the Adelphi, isn't it? Now, we did mention, Kieran, that I was at the Championship playoff final on Saturday as a guest of the EFL. I would like to point out that I was there. I did check, because eyebrows were raised when I said this. I did check with the EFL that no Sunderland or Sheffield United fan was losing a ticket because I was there. And they reassured me. They said, no, if you don't come, we'll give it to some other freeloader. Don't you worry. And also, I did point out, if we lose the final, I won't be anywhere near the place. But as it happened, I had the most relaxing journey. I even went for a pint in the pub I went to before the final just to feel what it was like, not to be a nervous, gibbering wreck. And I had a lovely time. I can't thank the EFL enough for the hospitality. Met some very nice people. But I didn't get to meet the probable new independent regulator. Several people said, let me introduce you. And either he wasn't in the mood to be introduced to the idiot one from the Price of Football, or on one occasion, I got sidetracked by Jim Montgomery, who was rather surprised that this big burly bloke leapt at him and said, you don't know who I am, but you provided me with the best ever moment of 1970s football, best save it. So I didn't get to meet the regulator. And if I had done, Kieran, I wouldn't have asked him this question because the wine was free and it was getting on. And there's a lot of words in it. But it seems that this is a long-winded way of saying the government has made a late concession to the Premier League about the regulator.
Yes, this is an intriguing one. Despite Richard Masters saying the Premier League was not going to lobby against the regulator, the Premier League has been lobbying non-stop, as has the EFL. And there has been a change in the latest reading. And to be fair, I believe the FSA are in favour of this, as are the EFL, as are the Premier League. I'm not, but let me explain why. Under the original proposals, if the backstop was triggered, and to be fair to David Cogan, the chair of the regulator, he has said it's something which he doesn't want, but it's something that could happen. And for people unfamiliar what we mean by the backstop, what the government has said to both the EFL and the Premier League, the best thing that you can do in terms of distribution is get round a table, hammer out a deal, put it to your members, and we don't have to get involved. And therefore, one of the objections of the Premier League is we don't want some bunch of specky beaks making the decision as to how money should be distributed. Well, that is within the gift of the Premier League itself. But unless it makes an offer to the EFL, then this is a concern. So what will happen is if the legislation is now passed, or under the original proposals, both the Premier League and the EFL have to put in a written submission to the regulator. And this is what we sometimes refer to as game theory. The regulator originally would choose the best of the two offers, or if he thought that they were both rubbish, said, go back and I want to see you again in, say, 4 weeks' time. You need to reconsider. And the logic behind that is that it means that they would both think, well, if we want to have the best deal to be considered, we've got to make some compromises. And therefore, it forces people towards a middle ground. What we now have is there has been a change in the rules, a change in the drafting of the legislation. And now the regulator can come up with a third option and effectively say, here's a deal which I'm going to come up with itself. And by all accounts, both the EFL and the Premier League are in favour of that. Now, one of the reasons why the Premier League has not put forward a deal, according to senior sources, is that they don't trust the EFL. They say if we give an offer today, what the EFL will do is that they will trigger the backstop once the legislation passes. So why should we give money away in 2025 when the regulator won't be in place until 26 or 27, wherever it's going to be? We're effectively giving away money in the short term. I guess the EFL's fear is that the regulator might choose, if the backstop deal, if the original legislation was in operation, the regulator might choose the Premier League option, and they don't like it. And I've not spoken to the FSA. I guess they think that the regulator can come up with the best of the best in terms of a deal. My gut reaction is that this is a misstep by the government, because it will now allow anything that doesn't work for the regulator. People will say, well, look, the regulator couldn't even get a decent distribution deal, and it lends weight to the critics of the deal. It also means that there's no incentive, or there's little incentive, for either the Premier League or the EFL to put forward a reasonable proposal as far as the regulator is concerned, and it's effectively just kicking the issue down the road. So, I was talking to an EFL owner recently who was convinced that under the old rules, the Premier League would actually come up with a deal, put that deal, because they feared so much that the regulator might choose the EFL deal. So I think it will put things back. I'm coming from a theoretical basis. I've seen game theory being applied from an economist's perspective, and it works. It's a bit like the prisoner's dilemma. It works in practice, but clearly the lobbying of the two parties has meant that it's not going to be applied.
I'll ask you about the prisoner's dilemma in a moment, Kieran, because I didn't have an Uncle Terry, so I'm not entirely au fait with that sort of thing. But having spoken to people from the Premier League earlier in the year and from Premier League clubs earlier in the year, the fact that the backstop was clearly something they didn't want to happen indicates to me that this isn't so much a compromise as a victory for the Premier League.
It is. Yeah, they will be absolutely delighted with this, and that's a cause for concern. If one part, I'm surprised the EFL are so much in favour of it, but that's what we've both read. I've not spoken to the EFL about it.
Well, it'd be interesting to do so, Kieran, and also to get the opinion of the FSA as to why they're for it as well. But I do need to know about the prisoner's dilemma.
Okay, you've got two people that have been arrested.
Right.
You put them in separate cells,
right,
and you go to each of them, and you're not certain whether either of them are guilty or either of them are innocent, but you think that they're probably both guilty. And what you say to them is, tell us what happened. If you confess and your partner doesn't, then he will get the blame for the offence, and he will go to prison for a long period of time, and you won't.
Right.
So can you see that there's four options? The sensible thing for the two prisoners to do is to say, wasn't me, Gov, and then actually you're struggling for evidence.
Yeah.
But by separating them, prisoner A, let's call him Uncle Terry, for example, he says, if I do this, if I confess, Uncle Tom, I did have an Uncle Tom, but he was a nice guy, Uncle Tom will get the majority of the offence, and Uncle Tom has an incentive to dib in Uncle Terry. So they both confess to the crimes, even though their best option would have been to say, I'm innocent. And it could be that the authorities don't have enough evidence to convince either of them, or to convict either of them.
I would have cracked under that sort of pressure. I would have confessed and grasped the other person up at the same time. My Uncle Tom was a lovely fella as well, actually.
My Uncle Tom was a watchmaker.
Was he?
Yeah, as opposed to a safe breaker.
What an interesting family you come from. Was he one of those watchmakers like from the repair shop with eight pairs of glasses?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. He was an absolute genius with what he could do.
What a loss to the family business, though, Kieran. I mean, really.
I think you're on mute.
Workday starting to sound the same?
I think you're on mute.
Find something that sounds better for your career on LinkedIn. With LinkedIn Job Collections, you can browse curated collections by relevant industries and benefits, like flex PTO or hybrid workplaces, so you can find the right job for you. Get started at linkedin.com/jobs. Finding where you fit. LinkedIn knows how.
Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for the stay.
It breaks my heart that traditional crafts are disappearing from this country, Kieran, because every time you meet a craftsman, there seems to be a gentle soul in there. So I'm sure some of them are proper wrong-uns, but, there always seems to be a gentle soul in there, and somebody who takes the time to learn and propagate a craft like that, probably more time than Ruben Amorim might be getting. That's by way of a link. And I mean, losing the Europa League was costly on the eyes and minds of all of us who had to sit through it. Kieran, I have to say, terrible terrible game, or it gave Palace fans hope that, to the extent that 3 people have already booked their room in Istanbul for the final. Well, we officially call it Istanbul now, Kieran. Manchester United are going to lose a lot of money, Kieran. And I wonder if you could comment on a rumour going around that part of losing that money is a penalty deal in their contract with the kit manufacturer, that if they don't get into win a European trophy every 2 years, they forfeit a slice of the money.
Yes, if you take a look at the Manchester United accounts, and for all the criticism that's levelled at the club, the accounts are very, very comprehensive because it's a listed company in New York. There is a £10 million penalty from Adidas if they fail to make the Champions League 2 years consecutively. So that will be triggered. At the same time, it means it goes from 90 million to 80 million. So I can assure you every other club in the land would be absolutely delighted to have an £80 million a year kit manufacturing contract. So certainly this story has been keeping me occupied with broadcasters. I don't think it's as bad as many are making out. If Manchester United will have lost a minimum of £80 million, probably somewhere in the region of 100 to 110 as far as gross money is concerned. And the reason for that is that there would have been 4 matches at Old Trafford at the dynamic pricing that we would have anticipated. And remember, we saw Aston Villa charging £97 for tickets against Bayern Munich this season. I would have expected Manchester United to have grossed close to £30 million from 4 games in terms of match day income. Then on top of that, you've got the money from UEFA itself, €30 million as a just for turning up, 2 million per victory, 700,000 for a draw. Again, a modest level of success there. You're talking 40 to 50 million. You add it all up. Even if Manchester United had just made the last 16, they would have generated in excess of £100 million. So that's top line. But again, I refer to one of the glib financial phrases that I'm prone to use. Revenue is vanity, profit is sanity. Because what also would happen is that Manchester United have a wage structure which is incentivized into getting into the into the Champions League. When Manchester United failed to do that on occasions in recent years, it meant that the wage bill was down between 40 to 50 million pounds as a result. You've also got the physical cost of hosting matches at Old Trafford or going overseas, 5-star hotels, private chartered planes, all of the costs that are involved. So you factor that in, and probably on a net basis, if they'd had a poor Champions League, on a net basis, perhaps 30 to 40 million, so that it's not that bad. The chances are that they're going to sell Rashford and Garnacho. And I appreciate this isn't a football show, but these things would be taken into account as much as I have expressed my loathing and disgust at the way that employees have been treated. If you get rid of 400 staff, there will be a substantial reduction in wages as well. It's noticeable that we're recording this on Tuesday night. Trafford Council have just given Manchester United a 2-star food hygiene rating for mouse droppings, for food being left past its sell-by date. Pretty horrendous stuff. Yes, given the prices that Manchester United charge for hospitality. We know that they were given a 1-star rating 18 months ago for serving raw chicken. With a completely demotivated staff, these things are going to happen again and again, despite the protestations of the club. So yes, there will be a financial cost to Manchester United, but there was a financial cost to Manchester United in finishing 15th in the Premier League compared to you would expect it to be in the top 5. Because there's £3.5 million per place. Very few clubs are guaranteed the same position in the Premier League season after season, apart from Crystal Palace and 12th, as we both know. So there have been costs, but there also have been cost savings.
I imagine the raw chicken was thrown to Roy Keane, wasn't it, for his the same way you throw live mice to snakes. I imagine that's just Roy devouring his chicken. That takes some doing, getting a 2-star. There was a long gone kebab place in Tooting called Kebab-ish, which only got 2 stars, and it's not even a real kebab. It's ish. It's two things on this, Kieran. On a serious note, knowing Ratcliffe's history so far, do you think? I mean, they're not losing money; they're just not getting extra money in a strange sort of way. But will that be an excuse for more cost cutting, as you mentioned, in terms of staff redundancies? And secondly, and this is a topic of discussion yesterday morning before too much alcohol was consumed. How is it? Ratcliffe and Man United have been saying for weeks there is no money. We haven't got any money. And yet, of course, over the weekend, all the pundits are saying, well, United have to strengthen the squad. They have to get players in that can play Ambrin's way. Those two don't fit. Where's this money coming from to buy these players that they so desperately need when their budget's taken such a big hit?
Yeah, I think if we look at those in turn, there certainly won't be jobs created as a result of Manchester United failing to qualify for the Champions League. There's no doubt about that. They've not yet seen the consequences of the wholesale redundancies that have been made. If you compare what's happening at Manchester United to what's happened in the United States with the Elon Musk and the doggy changes, which have slashed loads of jobs fairly indiscriminately, what's happened is that many people end up being rehired back as consultants or on contracts, and you end up losing nothing. So I'm slightly circumspect about the level of success that the redundancies will have made. They've certainly had a negative impact on morale. We know from people that we've spoken to after some of our live shows just how the feelings of people at the club are, or perhaps former people at the club are. In terms of the playing budget, the press are talking as if the Matheus Cunha deal from Wolverhampton Wanderers is a done deal.
Yeah.
£62.5 million. If he's coming to Manchester United at that level of transfer fee, then he's going to be on 120 to 150 grand a week. So that does appear to be inconsistent with the noises that the club has put out. I think Manchester United simply has to be smarter. It's called player trading for a reason. Trading involves both the exit door and the input door. Manchester United have been very unsuccessful in terms of player sales, and therefore, some players will be out of contract. There's some here, Lindelof, Eriksson. You've got the 2 players that we mentioned possibly being sold. They've just got to box a bit cleverer than they have done historically. But there's little there to indicate that the people at the club are capable of doing that. When you've got Ratcliffe coming in and advising the masseurs on, well, when I was in training for my marathon, this is how I would have done it. Yeah. There's always a danger. I've said that, in my opinion, the best type of owner is a benevolent dictator. A dictator who thinks that they are God's gift is probably the worst type of owner.
Yeah, Ratcliffe does have the look of a man who would massage himself if he could, didn't he? Just got that something about him, that old expression about if he was made of chocolate, he'd have licked himself to death long ago. But of course, for every... it sounds like an ABBA song, isn't it? For every loser, there's a winner. I think the comment of the week, without a doubt, on Match of the Day 2, following Tottenham's 4-1 defeat at home to Brighton, when the reporter said to him, how would you rate this season? And he just went, outstanding, mate. Outstanding. and for him, there's still some doubts to whether he'll be manager at the start of next season, but he'll be a bit richer.
Well, that's right. There is apparently a £2 million bonus to be given to Ange for bringing Spurs to their first trophy in 17 years, only the second trophy they've earned this century. And I guess from that perspective, he does feel vindicated. He is quite spiky towards the media. Yeah. I also read a report, and I've got no idea whether this is valid or not, that Manchester United had to give a bonus to Chelsea for Mason Mount in terms of getting to the Europa final.
Oh.
So, there's lots of stories doing the rounds, but this is reflective of there will be an awful lot of clubs that will have been delighted with results in recent weeks, including Crystal Palace, because of Bayern Munich winning the Bundesliga. Yeah. That would have been beneficial.
Yeah.
And I can assure you that the chief executives and accountants will be going through all of those contracts and rubbing their hands together with glee or cursing that particular results went against them, and therefore the bonuses or the add-ons that they would been not expecting but looking forward to or hoping for have not materialised.
Barry Fry was in a particularly ebullient mood after the Sheffield United Sunderland game, as it turns out. Someone explained to me that Peterborough had a sell-on clause for one of their players to Sunderland. If they went in the Premier League, they get another £1 million. So it was a free bar, but it looked like he would have spent some of it if it wasn't a free bar, I have to say. I also was just amusing ourselves yesterday with the idea that when Ollie Glasner's lawyers were negotiating the contract with Steve Parish, and they went, well, we'd like a clause where he gets extra money if we get into Europe. Steve Parish said, fine, whatever. That ain't going to happen. Put as much as you want down. Yeah, £10 million for getting to Europe. There you go.
Well, Ranieri did really well, didn't he?
Yeah, of course.
Because Leicester were 5 million if we win the Premier League.
Yes.
Yeah, you haven't laughed, mate.
I think most people, Kieran, would agree that Jeff Stelling has been one of the best broadcasters of his generation. They're still struggling to replace him. He was a fantastic figure. He's back in the news this week, and I'm not sure he'd particularly want to be. And I'm not sure enough of the details of this story to know whether he's on the right side of history here.
Yes, Jeff Stelling has been the honorary president of Hartlepool United for, I think, 8 or 9 years. The current owner, Raj Singh, has been trying to sell the club, or claiming that he's been trying to sell the club for a long period of time. And there's been some fascinating potential offers, including one from guys called Rob and Ryan from the United States.
Oh, really?
And that was rejected.
Uh-huh. Oh, no.
And they went and bought another club elsewhere.
Oh, no.
Exactly.
Oh, dear. Ringo went to another band. Oh, my God. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's been multiple, from my understanding, talking to people, senior sources, should we say, there's been multiple offers. And there has been an offer on the table recently. It looks as if the potential buyers of Hartlepool United had put down a deposit of 10% of the agreed price, but that Raj Singh wanted them to put down the other 90% before the deal was signed off.
Right.
Now, if I was advising anybody, and I'm sure if any lawyer was advising anybody, they say, not on your Nelly.
Yeah.
You'll get the other 90%. We'll happily put it into an escrow account, so therefore it can't be touched until the deal goes through. And then Raj Singh announced that he was going to poll season ticket holders. He'd sort of withdrawn funds, and he's now gone back to season ticket holders and said, actually, if you vote for me, I will put additional funds into the club. So it went to a vote, and the vote was you've got the choice of Raj Singh or nobody else.
Right.
So under those circumstances, 63% of season ticket holders said, well, we'll vote for Raj Singh then, because the fear was the club would go out of business.
Right.
It's a very, very bizarre thing to do. My understanding is that some of the offers have been in excess of more than £1 million. I'll be honest, Hartlepool's worth £1. It's a club which is losing money. It's losing £750,000 a year. It's in the National League. It's in the lower tiers of football. It's not got a TV deal, or a TV deal worth even shouting about at National League level, as we know. And yet he keeps saying, yes, I want to get this done, but I can't. The would-be owners have been trying to get the club for over a year. Raj Singh is saying, they're a bunch of charlatans, they've got no money. If that's the case, then don't take 10% of the asking price from them if they got no money.
Yeah.
So he's got a new board of directors which seem to be employees, and there is now sort of a Stasi-style character assassination on the prospective owners. Stories are being leaked that they are wrong-uns and so on. It's all very messy. It doesn't reflect well on the club. So I can understand it from Jeff Stelling's point of view. He's just had enough, and he says, I love the club, but it's being dragged through the mud, and I don't want to be associated with Raj Singh's Hartlepool United anymore.
Well, I'm relieved to hear that Jeff Stelling seems to be doing the right thing for the right reason, because he's somebody I respect very much as a human being and as a broadcaster. And also his he was a breath of fresh air in a way that very few people publicly in the media support a club like Hartlepool United. And his passion for that club shone through. So it's heartbreaking that he feels he has to do that. But that's obviously a story we'll keep an eye on. And talking of the National League, Kieran, the National League playoff finals coming up between two teams in Southend and Oldham, with probably amongst the biggest fan bases in that division. But a lot of their fans, for bizarre reasons, won't be getting the opportunity to go to Wembley for the final.
That's right. And we've just had the EFL playoff weekend.
Yeah, fantastic.
The crowds were superb.
Yeah.
They were absolutely brilliant. The atmosphere was fantastic. And as you rightly said, Southend and Oldham, I think they both could have sold 30,000 tickets.
Easy.
Because it's a trip to Wembley. You don't get that very often. But it turns out that one of the tube stations is closed, and therefore there's been put a limit, I think, of 17,500 tickets per club. I think they are, the Wembley authorities have released a few more tickets, but only to people travelling by coach. The problem is there's limited coach parks, so therefore there's a natural ceiling on that. The National League knew when their playoff final was taking place. I think perhaps they had gambled on it being, and no disrespect, yet Forest Green Rovers versus somebody else, some of the smaller clubs, and therefore there wouldn't have been such a big crowd. But there is a cap because of the work taking place at the Underground, closing the station. And we acknowledge that this has to be done. It's part of the maintenance and safety of the rail network, and therefore it's important it does take place. But if the National League had known this, why couldn't they have made a decision to locate the match elsewhere?
Yeah.
So, why not say, we'll have it at Villa Park?
Yeah.
Especially given that from a geographical point of view, it would have made far more sense. You would have got a few more people in. It would have been a full stadium and so on. So it just seems to be a lamentable own goal. We're aware that there are going to be changes at the top of the National League. We hope that the new incumbent will come on the show. We both know who it is. And therefore, we hope that the National League moves forward. Because National League football is brilliant, I can assure you. I've been to a few games. It's great. But the governance of the organisation, in my opinion, leaves a lot to be desired.
And the thing with travel to Wembley, Kieran, and some of us know what this is like, is that when you get your ticket and when the club tells you about the ticketing arrangements and the travel arrangements, you get these long emails and full of red and blue balloons and advice on which pubs you can use and so on. It's full of, we advise you not to travel by car. Yeah. It's much easier to use public transport. It's much more efficient. It's much more ethical to the environment. And yet here you are essentially giving some of those fans who do have tickets will have no option other than to travel by car or coach to Wembley. And like you say, even if it's still in London, but at the Emirates, you'd sell out 60,000. For Villa Park, you'd sell out 60,000. I don't think either Oldham or Southend fans would mind missing out on a trip to Wembley if it meant they got to see their team win.
Exactly.
The final. As for the interim new leader of the National League, who was also at Wembley, it's Terry Byfield, who was the CEO of Crystal Palace for 20 years, who had no choice but to accept an interview with us because of the amount of times I did stuff for nothing for him in the past 20 years. I mean, who knew that a Premier League club couldn't pay comedians to come and do a benefit? Made it so much more difficult to try and persuade Alan Davis, can we come and do a benefit? Well, for a Premier League club that's got 130 million quid in the broadcasting deal. Yeah, that club there. Terry volunteered to come on, actually. So I'm looking forward to that interview.
Are your business expenses playing hide and seek? With Uber for Business, the small spends that slip through the cracks, like rides and meals, go right where you need them. Because it integrates with leading expense platforms, you can say goodbye to surprise costs, missing dollars, or chasing receipts. Everything's track-downable. Uber for Business. Make small steps that make a big impact. Learn more at uber.com/small steps.
At Capella University, you can learn at your own pace with our FlexPath learning format. Take 1 or 2 courses at a time and complete as many as you can in a 12-week billing session. With FlexPath, you can even finish the bachelor's degree you started in 22 months for $20,000. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu. Fastest 25% of students. Cost varies by pace, transfer credits, and other factors. Fees apply.
A story, Kieran, that we didn't predict it would happen, but this is one of the ways we thought could be the outcome about Blackburn Rovers women's team.
Yes, this is sad news. They've withdrawn from the Women's Championship for next season, citing insufficient funding. Blackburn women's team is losing money, as is every club in the WSL, in effect, in both the WSL and the WSL Championship. But the losses are not huge. If you take a look at the men's team, if I was making a decision, I'd close. Why not close the club which is making the biggest losses? Well, that wouldn't be countenanced.
Yeah.
So if they've withdrawn from the Championship, now they are citing sort of compliance costs. They've got to pay, because it's all professional, got to pay the minimum wage, and the numbers simply don't add up. It's just disappointing. We've just seen Arsenal win the Champions League, and it's a real fillip for women's football. And I'll be honest, I don't think anybody expected Arsenal's women's team to do it, but they did it. Absolutely fantastic. We've got the Euros coming up. There's normally a bounce in terms of interest and attendance in women's football following the Euros, especially, of course, if England replicates their success that they had in the last Euros. So to withdraw from the Championship does seem pretty petty by the Venkies, but that's not necessarily out of character. You just feel sorry for those participants, those supporters, the women who have chosen to go have a career in professional football and effectively are now being asked to work on a part-time basis. It is a blow, and you've got to look at the owners really here. And the Venkies certainly have the money. I know that they've got issues to deal with back in India, but I think it reflects poorly on them.
Well, also, it's a bigger issue than one we can discuss in the pod, but what sort of message does it send, Kieran, to young women and girls in the Blackburn area when they're seeing the women's team not being taken as seriously as it should be, really, for the want of, let's face it, for the want of not very much money? And it closes down avenues for young girls to go and train, to go and meet other people from different cultures and different backgrounds. So it's not just the demotion of a women's football team to a less important level. It has a knock-on effect for all. And we saw you saw the brilliant young crowds celebrating Arsenal's win, and it looks like women's football. The crowds at league games are consolidating, and there was information last week suggesting that more away fans are starting to go to games in the Women's League, and hopefully the Euros will lead to that bounce. But as Ian Wright said, when England won the European final, when there are clubs and sponsors who are not prepared to commit fully to it, that bounce isn't going to last as long as you hope. And then we come to our last story, Kieran, which puts it into stark perspective when we find out how much Premier League clubs have paid in wages since the inception of the Premier League. And I wouldn't have, if you'd given me a four-choice answer on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, I wouldn't have gone for this one. I wouldn't have thought it. It's ridiculous, Kieran.
Yes, I was working on an article for a broadcaster for a sports page. So I went into my archives. I got hold of every single set of accounts of every club in the history of the Premier League, put it all together. £49 billion has been paid out in wages since 1992 and the creation of the Premier League. I don't think it will come as any surprise that Chelsea are top of the wage bill, given the impact that Roman Abramovich had. It might come as a slight surprise, and we're not trying to kick a man when he's down here, that second is Manchester United, and they're only £30 million behind Chelsea. But the acceleration, the expansion of wages at Premier League level has been spectacular. I will defend the right of any working person to negotiate a contract for the best of their ability. Because when people say, well, it's obscene and they don't deserve it, well, the alternative is giving more money to the billionaires that own the clubs.
Yeah.
Why target Why target the working people, the people we go to watch, as opposed to the billionaire owners? But this is reflective of a broader issue of getting people to fight amongst themselves when the ultra wealthy just sit there serenely smiling away whilst we consume ourselves. So yeah, an amazing amount of money. When the accounts come out this year, we would have gone well through the £50 billion level. Some fans will say we've got value for money, and I think there'll be one or two clubs certainly at present feeling that they haven't.
Was there a year, Kieran, or a period of years where you could identify the graph going vertically all of a sudden?
Yes, 2003, when Roman Abramovich came in, and in the words of David Dean, his tanks were firing £50 notes across our lawn.
Yeah.
And the other two was in 2014 and 2017, when new Premier League TV deals came through, which increased the money from the TV companies on both of those occasions by 70%. So agents went to clubs, and rightly so, and said, well, the reason why the TV companies are willing to pay this additional money is to see my client play. If you want to see them play, you've got to pay them accordingly. So yes, there have been some sort of hockey stick events, but there's been a constant rise, which has tended to coincide with the renewal of the TV deals, because that has been a significant accelerant.
Well, this is probably something we should talk about on another pod, Kieran, when you've had more time to prepare. But it's interesting how quite a few journalists debating the Forest banning Gary Neville from the last game of the season, saying they wouldn't allow him in the ground as a pundit, and saying that this is, Sky and the Premier League will both be in heavy discussions about this, because with the amount of money that Sky are paying the Premier League, any Premier League club shouldn't be in a position where they're refusing entry to a Sky employer. I know we had the situation when Alex Ferguson wouldn't speak to the BBC for 5 years because of allegations he claimed they made about his son, and neither the BBC or the Premier League at that time wanted to take Alex Ferguson on. But I don't think this is a situation that, Gary Neville won't let it go, we know that, but it's certainly one to research for our next pod. In the meantime, don't forget you can now join our Price of Football Club, where you'll get ad-free listening, bonus episodes, access to Kieran and I's lovely mugs, and a chat on a monthly basis. I mean, faces, not actual. We sold out of mugs, I believe. And if you want any of that, you can go to priceoffootball.com for a very regular monthly, reasonable and regular, and click on Join the Club to sign up today. If you have a question you like answered on our next show, which should be Tuesday, the question show, it won't be that, it'll be in a year's time, but you'll get on a waiting list for the questions at priceoffootball.com. Although if you become a Price of Football Club member, you will get a separate questions podcast, which is for the topical questions that you ask. Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter X, you can find us on YouTube, and if you'd like to buy our book, you can find details on that same website, priceoffootball.com. As I say, we'll be back on Tuesday with our questions episode. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, as always, thank you for correcting us when we're wrong, saying nice things about us at other times as well. We will openly admit that we take on all feedback, and I think it's important to do so. Thank you to all the club members for the level of support. There's another way that you can support the show, and that's to give us a review. It will take you 30 seconds. You can write whatever you want. You could even say you would like to have a bit of, we're men of a certain age, many of us listeners, even say you'd rather have the show presented by Eddie Large and Sid Little. And I believe Sid Little is now a painter and decorator.
I believe, Eddie definitely can't do that.
Yes.
For various reasons. Sid, as long as neither of them played the guitar, I'd be fine with that. Talking of correcting us, Kieran, I should point out it's not Terry Byfield who's the new head of the National League. It's Phil Alexander.
Yes, I thought it was Phil.
Yeah, yes. Terry Byfield was our press secretary. He would be, I think, slightly baffled by the fact that he was now the interim head of the National League, and would also have to do his tie up all the way to the top button, which would annoy him as well. It's Phil Alexander, who was the ex-CEO of Crystal Palace and who is now the interim head of the National League. So apologies to both, especially if Terry's had to have a little lie down to recover from the shock. Although Terry would be he'd be a very, very wonderful fan. And it was one of those brilliant things at the end of the FA Cup final to see someone like Terry, who's been with us for decades, taking some of the games I've seen him out on the pitch, don't bear describing. Late at night, away. I remember one Norwich away game late at night. You think, poor sod, he's got to sort the press out, hasn't it? So it's brilliant to see a loyal club employee like that cavorting on the pitch at Wembley after the FA Cup final. I'll stop there before I get into trouble with both Terry and Phil. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.